Hi, everybody. I'm Scott, and thanks for joining us again today for another episode of the In Medicine and On Medicine podcast. This is Susan. Hi, Susan.
Hi.
Susan is an Oriental medicine doctor and East Asian medical practitioner here in the Las Vegas, Nevada Valley. You'll see her information come across the screen every so often. You may also leave comments in the comments section below. We will try and get your answers and questions and queries answered for you. Today, we are going to dig into a topic that none of you wants to hear about, myself included, but
Hey.
is very important. And it's a big hey from Susan, and you may even come out on the other side having learned something and be a little, maybe I ought to take a look at this. So let me start with, first of all, we're going to talk about our ideal weight, diet, health, and what we put into our body. So start with, what is the predicament of Americans as you look at it from your side?
Okay. Well, first of all, I think this is a very interesting subject.
I didn't say it wouldn't be interesting. I said
Okay.
difficult.
Okay. Well, I don't know if it's difficult. Okay. Well, anyway, so I guess we would start off with the typical American diet. Now, before we get into that, pretty much everybody is aware that there are certain health problems that are typical here in the United States of America, that are the things that kill more people than other things, like, for example, coronary artery disease, heart disease, diabetes, cancers, that type of thing. And so a lot of us are also aware that there's something called SAD, and that stands for the Standard American Diet. And it's considered sad because it pretty much is sad. But it wasn't always accepted that food had anything to do with our health. That really...
And it wasn't always sad, was it, the standard American diet?
Oh, no. Well, I'll tell you about that. So anyway, it wasn't until, let's see, 50, 60 years ago that the government started thinking, there's really something to this, like, food thing, like maybe it's important. I mean, actually kind of before that, like right around like 1906. I mean, I think that was when they started, that was like the precursor to the FDA. President Lincoln actually instituted something before that, where they started to look at like food labeling, and could people just make crazy claims for things that they were manufacturing, either drugs or food products. And so the government started to get into like that kind of like regulating stuff like that. And then around 1906, that's when they started to regulate things like interstate commerce, where food or drinks or drugs or whatever the government became concerned with the labeling, that it actually had to have, labels that actually said what was actually in it. So there was some awareness. And then it wasn't until about 50 years ago that the government really took on more of an active role into trying to figure out, well, what is a healthy diet, and what should people be eating? And because they started to realize, we have a vested interest in having a healthy population. Healthy populations tend not to be very expensive, right? The more unhealthy a population is, the more expensive it is, right? Because the more health problems that they have, and the more interventions that
we were talking about how China deployed these millions of acupuncturists out into the field to try and keep
Chinese doctors,
to keep their population healthy. So the same problem exists all throughout the world,
right? And at all periods of time, it's always been an issue. So yeah, when the Chinese when the communists came to power and they realized, whoa, we have like almost 1 billion people and we have to provide health care. What are we going to do? And so then they instituted the Barefoot Doctor program, which was, the Barefoot Doctors were trained. They were kind of like a acupuncturist, EMT kind of LPN kind of level, but it was better than anything anybody had. And so, they knew some basic pharmaceuticals, they knew some basic diagnostics, they knew, the basics basically, and but still, I mean, it was a very successful program. So
But here we have what this burgeoning Western medicine practice, and
right,
we're starting to look at what we put into our bodies, what they're selling
right.
you to put into your bodies. And I imagine if we go back and research, like there were some incidents, like of people dropping dead from tainted food or
Oh,
whatever, or
well,
food
yeah. I
poisonings were
mean,
horrible.
I think it was the Spanish-American
Right,
War at the beginning of the 1900s. More people died from the food than
right,
died from
right, right.
bullets, because the food was so bad. Yeah. And of course, nutritional science is like any science. I mean, it goes forward and kind of fits and starts. People get a hypothesis, they test the hypothesis. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. I mean, it kind of goes. People, we learn things over the course of time, right? And so, I mean, I'm not quite old enough, but I'm almost old enough to remember when cigarettes were considered healthy.
Right.
That was a little bit before my time, but not that much, right? Like more doctors smoke Kents, or whatever, and that was actually a thing.
I remember the scene in Mad Men where Joni's at the gynecologist with her legs spread and he's smoking.
Okay, well,
It's just the most
okay. Well,
horrifying
clearly
scene.
that made some sort of impression on you. I'm not gonna,
You're
I'm not
horrified.
gonna
But anyways, but
speculate on that.
that's
But
what we
anyway,
thought.
so yeah, so we started figuring it out, and it was about uh, around then that the United States put out their first food pyramid. I think Sweden was the first country that put out a food pyramid,
Okay.
but then we put out a food pyramid, which basically had, the base of the pyramid. It was the food that you should eat more of, and then the next level you should eat those foods too, but a little bit less and a little bit less, and then finally at the top were like oils and fats and stuff like that. And that's evolved over time. So they look at it like every 5 years, and they kind of look at, is this legitimate, and is this something that
Yeah, but we seem to be going backwards with the shit they're allowed to put into the food now.
Well, okay. Well, let's not
Okay,
jump too far
we'll come
ahead.
there. Okay.
So they also were under a great deal of pressure from food manufacturers, right? Who wanted their foods to be shown in a good light. And so, like I was just reading a book that said something, there was a phrase that said, bureaucracies are living things. And like all living things, their first instinct is self-preservation. And I thought, ooh, that's true.
Yep.
Right? That can be true. So yeah, so they're under a lot. So the government and, big agribusiness, they're under a lot of pressure to, give people good advice, but there's also a lot of, pressure from corporations to have their influence. It's kind of like the drug industry too.
Mhm.
It's like it's a difficult thing to navigate. So anyway, so the other thing is that like at the beginning of the 1900s, okay, most poorer people or most people at the lower end of the economic strata had a relatively healthy diet. Okay, they were living pretty close to the land, and so their food was pretty simple
Minimal
grains.
processing.
Yeah, they couldn't afford any of that stuff. Whereas more wealthy people had access to a lot of really high fat, highly processed foods, and so actually more wealthy people tended to suffer from diseases, I guess, or conditions related to having a poor quality diet, like gout, like obesity, like diabetes, like heart disease. Okay.
And then we also had this impression of wealthy people back then as being big roly-poly people because they were
right.
wealthy.
And that's something that's very consistent in lots of cultures where people that were fat were considered, successful and wealthy because they could afford to be. And there's, some truth to that. So actually people at a lower economic status had probably a healthier diet than more affluent people. But then over time, that started to change. And that started to change because of what I would call, anyway, like kind of corporate America.
The processed food revolution.
The processed food revolution. That's a really good way of putting it. Where that was kind of like, I think after World War II, when culturally we started thinking that, science or technology could solve all of our problems.
Ease.
right?
We wanted ease, like the
Right.
Swanson frozen dinner thing.
Oh
and-
my God, yeah. And yeah, so science and technology, that was going to be our savior. And the more we process things, the better and the healthier it was going to be. And so it got a little that got a little bit tricky. Um, so so then what ended up happening was slowly over time, processed foods became more prevalent and they also became cheaper. And so there
and more
became
processed too, didn't they? They
right.
just
I thought I just
processed
said
them
that, but
more.
yeah.
No, but I
So
mean the level of
yeah,
process.
So then over time, we started with, people at the lower end of the economy having a relatively healthy diet because they couldn't afford anything else. People at the higher end having an unhealthy diet because they could afford it. And then that shifting where then fresh foods, fresh unprocessed foods became something that only more wealthy people could afford. And people at the lower end of the economic pyramid or whatever could only afford increasingly more processed and more processed and more processed foods.
And you know what's fascinating? This diminishing peak of point of return where
Yeah.
all of a sudden it became more cost effective to process more.
Yeah.
So it's cheaper to process more
Yeah.
than to less. And
Yeah.
there's something wrong in that whole equation.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many directions we could go with this conversation because, like, I was just before we started, I was like reviewing some things about like food labeling. I mean, food labeling is ridiculous. I mean, it's like you need a PhD in food labeling, and that's today. I mean, it used to be way harder to figure out than it is.
I read an article the other day about one of the biggest scams in that arena is use by, sell by, good by. Like they have all
Oh,
these
yeah.
terms on like dairy products and whatnot, and
Yeah.
they all mean something different. It doesn't mean when you should
Right.
throw it out necessarily. So
Right.
yeah, so this is all these things in our lexicon have changed and
Right.
influenced the way we look at things, which incorrectly for the most part.
Right. So I was just like the last label that I looked at before we started today was a type of peanut butter. Now, okay, peanut butter should have like one thing in it, right? It should have peanuts in it. Okay, so if it has anything else in it, like that's pretty weird. Like, okay, what? And I was looking at this label on some kind of highly processed peanut butter, and it said that an average serving was 32 grams. And then it said the total fat, and peanut butter is mostly fat,
Yeah.
right? Okay, so the total fat content was 17 grams.
Okay.
And then it said, no, wait. Yeah, 17 grams out of 32 grams.
Okay.
And then it said that was 17%. It said, and that's 17% of the total. And it's like, wait a minute. 17 grams is not 17% of 32
Right,
grams.
right.
It's
They're-
more like 50%
Right.
of 32 grams. So what does that even mean? And then it had all the different fats, saturated fats, monounsaturated fats, polyunsaturated fats, blah, blah, blah. But the bottom line is what does that
Right,
even mean?
right.
I mean, somebody could look at that and go, oh, well, this is only 17% fat, so it's probably good for me. No, it's not that it's not good for you, but that's so deceptive, right? And
Well,
then
that's like the soups are the things that it'll say 40% less sodium, but 40% less of disgustingly
high sodium.
high sodium is still high sodium.
Right. I was just looking at a bottle of like canned soup or something,
Right.
and it had like 780
It's a disgusting
grams of sodium. It's like my God,
kill you.
it's so much sodium. I mean, it just makes me have heart palpitations just thinking about it. But so there's that. So one thing I think that if we're going to go farther into any nutrition is we just got to talk a little bit about chemistry, just a little bit, tiny bit about chemistry, but it's actually really cool, I think.
Okay, I just find it let's go there.
Yeah.
And I just find it interesting that though over time the level of the quality of standards continues to slip here, and more and the whole point of this 5-year review seems to be getting less and less related to what its original point was to make us healthier, not less healthy.
Correct. And also our behavior has changed as a society. I mean, which amazes me. It just amazes me that, I just had a patient today, for example, and I said, I took her pulse, and I'm like, did you eat today? And she said, no, I ate last night. I'm like, okay, well, that, did anybody ever tell you breakfast is the most important meal of the day? And she's like, yeah, whatever. She said, but I'll eat one of these. They're really healthy. And she showed me this, I don't know what the heck it was, some kind of bar. And I was like, I can't look at this. Okay. But that's something that people think is healthy. And, and then I have like chocolate in my office. So then she picked it. She's like, and I'll take some of these for dessert, and so it's and a lot of people do that. Or so many people eat at fast food restaurants. So many people. And get most of their nutrition from that. Or
We're in
from
the fast food capital of the world. They say Las Vegas has the highest
it's amazing.
concentration of fast food per capita population.
And it's amazing, like driving around here at lunchtime, and it's everywhere.
And they're packed.
It's packed, absolutely packed. And, this is not the healthiest food in the world. So what have we got? We've got millions of fast food restaurants, and we have millions of gyms where people are going and obsessively working out because, they're unhappy with their shape or whatever. I mean, it's just completely topsy-turvy. And, my feeling is you can work out all you want, but if you're, eating at McDonald's, you're going to have problems. Okay. Chemistry is actually pretty cool.
Okay.
And so, there's many things that people that study this for a living, that nutritionists look at, amino acids and vitamins and all kinds of stuff. But for our general purposes today, there's like 4 things that we want to look at in our food, right? Protein, simple carbohydrates, which are also called sugars, complex carbohydrates, which are also called starches, right? And fats. And okay, so all calories are not created equal, right? Because these 4 things do different things, right? Protein is like the building blocks of our cells, right? Simple carbohydrates, sugars, quick energy, right? Comes in, we break it down really fast, boom. Complex carbohydrates, also for energy, but I'll explain this in a little bit why this is. It's for like more it's like time release. It's like a time release capsule of energy, right? And then fats are really for storage for later, right? Okay. We want to put that away for later. So calories wise, protein, 4 calories a gram. Simple sugars, simple carbohydrates, sugars, 4 calories per gram. Complex carbohydrates or starches, 4 calories per gram. Fats, 9 calories per gram. Okay. So they all have the same calories, or except for fats, but we break them down differently, right? So like with protein's like this molecule, and it's got this little nitrogen hanging off the end. And so one of the things that we have to do when we're digesting it is we have to snip off that nitrogen, okay? So there's like a little waste involved with eating proteins. A simple carbohydrates is a really short little molecule. We break it up really fast, boom, burn it up, right? Like eat a piece of candy, go run around the block, right? We burn it up really fast. Complex carbohydrates are the same as the simple sugar, right? The simple carbohydrates, the same exact thing. It's just a chain of
like
those.
A bowl of oatmeal is
right. So what I'm trying to say is that like a sugar, right? A simple carbohydrate is a little bitty chain, a few molecules put together, and a complex carbohydrate is just longer. It's just a longer chain, so the body has to break down all of those bonds, and it takes a lot more energy, and it takes a lot more time.
Okay.
And then fat's a whole other thing. So, but the other thing about fats are that they make us feel full. So if you're like thinking, oh, I want to have a healthy diet and I want to just not eat fats, well, okay, you can do that, but you're probably going to be hungry all the time. And so you're going to have to figure out what to eat more often. Now, a lot of times people say, well, you need fats, you need healthy fats. And it's like, yeah, you do. But fat is so prevalent in everything we eat anyway that you really don't need to add extra. You really don't need to add extra fats to things. If you take a skinless, boneless chicken breast and you poach it, that's still 30% fat.
Right.
So, I mean, you don't have to add extra things. But, fat tastes good. We all like that. So we're looking at, we need all of those four things, right, to be healthy. And so then it's a matter of, well, how do we get those things? And so, and that's when food choices come in. So there's a few um, theories. Well, actually, let me tell you a little bit more. Let me tell you a little bit about a guy named Weston Price. Now, Weston
Okay.
Price was very, very controversial. He was born in the 1800s. I think he published one of his first studies in like 1930. So this is a long time ago, okay? But he was considered a pretty radical guy. He was a dentist, okay? Well, then he got into nutrition, and he's very controversial, but his research was considered very well done. Okay.
And it sounds like this would be a natural progression, right? He takes care of teeth.
Yeah.
And so what affects teeth more than what you eat?
Well, but nobody knew that.
Right,
back
right.
then,
But he gets
right?
down that rabbit hole,
He
and
does.
it makes sense that he would go there.
Exactly. So he goes all over the world and he looks at everybody's teeth. And he looks at literally hundreds of thousands of people's teeth. I mean, like an enormous number of people. And what he discovers is that if people are eating what he called their natural diet, whatever that was, didn't matter, they had great teeth. And when they deviated from that natural diet, that's when they started having tooth decay. For example, in like the South, like Southeast Asia, not Southeast Asia exactly, but like in Polynesia, or what they used to call
Okay.
Polynesia, where the natural diet is pretty much fish and fruit, and that's it. Okay. What he discovered when he went there was that the older generation had great teeth, but younger people who had been exposed to Western foods, Western processed
Yep.
foods, and also, things imported from other places had terrible teeth, right? He went to like the Caucasus in Eastern Europe, up in the mountains where people lived to be like 100 years old all the time. And their diet was like milk and hazelnuts. Like completely different. And again, as long as they ate the traditional diet, they had great teeth. So, and that's what he discovered all over the world. And so, like I used to,
And what do we mean by this traditional diet? By this?
well,
what's
it's all
your-
different, and it's actually kind of fun. And when I was teaching this, I taught this class a few times, and one time I taught it to I did Chinese nutrition for massage therapists, because massage therapists have a unique relationship with their patients.
Yep.
They have a lot of time that they can spend and talk to them, and they can also model good, healthy behaviors if they care to.
Yep.
And so I taught this class, and one of the things that I had them do was research what is your personal natural diet. So you have to go back to your ancestors. Where did your people come from? Okay. So, and invariably what they discovered was that, oh, I love these foods, whatever they were. So like, for example, I had, well, now I should say before this, now, in other countries, like in France, if you're born in France, chances are a lot of your ancestors came from France, right? It's only in the United States of America, we're a land of immigrants. And so unless you're a Native American, everybody came from somewhere. So
But Weston Moore is finding out that even though everybody lives in different things and everybody's exposed to different regional cuisine, that's usually within a 50-mile radius of where they live,
right.
But that it works for each
It totally
different
works.
subgroup,
right? Because they've evolved with this type of diet, So a couple things. So like I had this patient, and she was having trouble with her weight, and she was not the healthiest person on earth. Anyway, her family, born and raised in the United States, but all of her people came from Ireland. So I was like, I told her about this. I'm like, why don't you go back and research what the typical Irish diet is? And she did. She got this Irish cookbook, and she started making all this Irish food, and she lost 10 pounds.
and you would think that would you sit there and say she ate all the
Butter
traditional Irish food,
and
right? That she would
eggs
gain
and
weight, right?
No. And she was like, oh my God, these are all my favorite foods.
Right,
It's like,
right.
of course, one of my students in the massage therapy class, his people came from Western Russia. And when he did his research, which of course nowadays you don't go to the library. It's so easy to find what the natural diet is from your ancestors. It's like on Google, you can Google it in no time. And the two main things from the area where his people were from was oatmeal and herring. And he said, I love oatmeal and herring. And it's like, okay.
But what about those? So many of us now are of mixed heritage.
Right. So, for example, I had another patient whose, I think it was her mother was from, I'm going to say Nigeria, and her father was from Wales. Okay, that's pretty diverse. So she researched the Welsh diet and the Nigerian diet, and what she found was the Nigerian diet really resonated with her. That she was like, I love all these foods, and I can't remember now. It was like lentils and potatoes.
But
and
one might
onions.
find that some of both would be
Yeah.
appealing.
Yeah. So
it's just
especially
about what relates back to your genes.
right. It really relates back, and also to me, and this is just my opinion, but this is also why people, basically why diets don't work really, because like the keto diet or the this diet or the that diet, they're all pushing everybody into one little, like one square peg in a round hole.
Takes the individuality away,
right? And it doesn't take in their individuality. And so, like for example, my father's family came from Ireland, my mother's family came from Italy, and like I can eat pasta all day long and not gain any weight, right? And yet I've known people who basically look at pasta and gain 10 pounds. I mean, but who are ethnically from a different location, and so they don't handle that kind of diet very well. So that's why when that's why you'll run into people that are like, ooh, keto, it's great, or ooh, keto, it's horrible, I felt terrible, or a vegetarian diet, we did a vegan diet, remember, for 10 months, and it was great.
For 10 months.
I had absolutely no energy. I could barely drag myself out of bed. And I just was, after 10 months, it was like, I can't go on with this.
That's the problem with all these diets. They're good for now.
But they're good for,
yeah.
Like I have a very good friend who has been a vegan now for almost 15 years, and it works for him perfectly. He is really, really good at it. And he feels really healthy as long as he keeps to a vegan diet. As soon as he deviates, he's like,
okay, but he's also overweight. So
yeah, but he also, I mean, we know who we're talking about, but he also is very sedentary. Okay. And as soon as he starts exercising, he starts dropping weight like crazy, So there's that piece too.
Yep.
But the point is that he is a very high functioning person and is very high functioning on a vegan diet, where I couldn't string two thoughts together on a vegan diet. So
there are those exceptions.
Right. And we kind of all have to figure it out on our own, right? So what I tell people is figure out where your people came from and what their natural diet was. And that's a good place to start. Okay. So then another guy I wanted to bring up was Matsuoka Fukioka, who was obviously a Japanese guy. And I think he worked for the post office. I don't know why I think that. But anyway, he became really interested in diets and in nutrition. And he published a book that was out of print for a long, long, long time. And I think it's back in print. I think you can find it still. It's called The One Straw Revolution. Okay. It's great. And what he figured out was that there were and he came up with these 4 diets. The diet of indulgence, which was I want to eat whatever I want to eat whenever I want it, which is the standard American diet, or SAD. There is the diet of purpose, which is I want to gain 10 pounds, I want to lose 10 pounds. Okay. I'm doing something. I'm a bodybuilder.
Taking action.
I wanted, okay. But you're not really trying to be nutritionally. You're not trying to find what's best for you nutritionally. You have another purpose. There's another purpose, or who knows what the purpose is. I don't know. And then the other one was the diet of conscience, which means you're eating a certain way because of your beliefs, like
kosher,
right? Or you think eating animals is wrong, but you have it's your conscience, or it's a religious thing or whatever. And then this other 4th thing called the natural diet. Okay. And what he discovered, which was a lot like what Weston Price had discovered with his teeth, looking at people's teeth, was that 150 years ago, we were born, we lived our whole lives, we died, and all of our food was raised in a 50-mile radius for most of the world. And that had been going on for millennia. Okay.
Right. We
So
didn't have all this importing and exporting.
and people traveling and
Right,
moving and
right.
migrating, and we didn't have any of that. Okay, everybody was pretty much where they were. And so what he said was, if you can get back to your natural diet and figure out what that is, then that's the healthy optimal diet for you. And that's why my patient who could go back to a traditional Irish diet and was very healthy and had loads of energy and everything else. And then my patient whose people were from Nigeria and Wales went back to the Nigerian diet. So it's like that. So there is a way of sort of figuring out what the optimal diet is for you, and what the optimal diet is for you is different from the optimal diet for anybody else.
So, like when you do this with patients or you do this with students, it must be almost amusing when they come back to you with these revelations of, oh my God, I can't believe that this is
Oh,
what
it's
works for
great.
me so well.
Yeah.
And they probably have the perception of it's something I probably shouldn't be eating, but it is something you should be eating.
Right. Or it's something that I really like,
Right.
that really agrees with me, and I feel
Yeah.
really good doing it. No, but the number of people I have told about this and the number of people who have actually done it are two vastly different numbers. I mean, basically, and that takes us to like the societal thing, where I mean, it's just amazing to me. Like people will come in whose main complaint is that they've gained a bunch of weight, for example. And I got to tell you, you reach, 60, and I mean, it is
You can't eat like you used to.
you can't.
Yeah.
And my personal experience is that I've experienced that my whole life. Like I had to take a pretty hard look at my diet like every 10 years,
Right,
like
right.
20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. And what I discovered just for myself was that my nutritional needs changed over time and are still changing. And so, but yeah, like what I could eat 10 years ago or what I could eat 20 years ago or 40 years ago is different than what I can eat now.
So
If I want to maintain the weight that I am.
right. So going back to the education of all this, when you're teaching this to your students, and you're like doing label education and whatnot, do you ever like send them out in the field and have them
Oh my
go see
God,
what's
yes,
in
it's
this stuff
so,
we
now
eat?
that is fun. Okay, that is really fun. Yeah, so one time in a class, I gave everybody $5. And I said, okay, go out at lunchtime and find the worst example of a processed food that you possibly can. And then we'll vote on who wins. Okay. And oh my God, the things that they brought in. Well, of course, there's always the purist who brings in spam.
Right,
Okay.
right.
So of course someone brought in spam. Someone brought in this like, God, it was some kind of chocolate. I think it was like an energy drink. No, it wasn't an energy drink. It was like well, I guess it was kind of an energy drink, but it was like a nutritional. Anyway, it was full of fat. I mean, it
Or
was.
like if you think about those bars you were talking about earlier, if
Oh,
you look
those
at what's
things.
in those, you can't pronounce half of it.
Yeah, there's God knows. Well, and there's that. But the person that won, like I can't remember all the crazy things that people brought in that they had found, but the one that we all voted on that won was Cheetos for
Oh,
babies.
gross.
Yeah, Cheetos for babies, not
Gross.
just regular Cheetos.
Whoa.
Cheetos for babies, because that's a whole thing about teaching kids and their parents to eat junk food basically from birth. I mean, it's really pretty nefarious.
That is.
Yeah, the Cheetos for babies. That guy.
Talk about
Even the guy that
indoctrination.
even the guy who brought in the spam was like, okay, that's beyond.
Right.
That's too much for me. That's a bridge too far. But yeah, we're like, so it's a lot. It's a lot of propaganda that we've all been fed over the years, and then it's also this lifestyle of go 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 go. In my office, I have an next door neighbor who's an attorney, and she works really really hard. And when I walk by her office, sometimes I can't help but notice all of the fast food wrappers, like and I mean, she's a really smart person and really really nice, and she works really hard, and I know she probably feels like, well, I can't, this is all I have time for, and so that's tough. That requires a real kind of commitment to make a change and to put your nutrition and your health on, kind of make it more of a priority. when our society and there's all these pressures on us to not make it a priority. Like where did I go? I was thinking I was going to join a gym, and I think that ship has sailed. I think I've joined one too many gyms in my life, and I don't think I'm going to do it anymore. But I went into a local gym, and I thought, oh, God, look at this. And they had like this whole juice bar place, and I just briefly kind of looked at the menu and I
The
thought,
workout is
this
just a
is
part of the menu of the whole
right. I
thing.
mean, I
Right,
just
right.
thought, okay, this is like really,
It's too much of an experience.
yeah, this is too many calories. Okay, this is like, I don't know about this. But it also feeds into this. I want it right now. I want it to taste a certain way. I want it to be sweet and whatever. And it's a bigger problem than
Right. They had sit here in the recovery chair so you could overdo it over here beforehand, and
right.
it was just
Yeah.
the whole
It's a
philosophy was
whole consumption ideology, that's really, really tough. And so there's that. And then one thing that I noticed in the news recently, very recently, like in the last few weeks, was that the new Secretary of Health and Human Services, Robert Kennedy Jr., appears to have come out with, and we can put this up on the
okay.
wall, although I mean, where he's decided, and apparently he has decided on his own or with people that he has handpicked, that the food pyramid that we've kind of become used to, it needs to be turned upside down. And so what he has said, or his dietary guidelines for Americans, is that the point now is at the bottom, and that's whole grains. Like we shouldn't
Okay.
be eating whole grains.
Hey,
And then when you
lots of
move
fat.
up, it's what's it got? Fruit, cereals, nuts, butter,
Oh, that's ridiculous.
shrimp, eggs, avocados, canned tuna, and then the top, where we're supposed to be eating the most, is meat, cheese, dairy products, and vegetables.
Okay, that's ridiculous. And that's from somebody who snorts cocaine off of toilet seats. But
Well,
so let's
I wouldn't say that, but what I would say is I don't see the scientific rigor
because
necessary
right.
for promulgating. Hello, I can't pronounce that word. For putting this out as being the dietary guidelines for an entire country of 330 million
Right.
people, based on what? I mean, he just popped this out. I mean, this stuff takes years of research. So
Right, let's
I don't get
let's
it.
talk about your arena now. So, how does Chinese medicine look at nutrition, and then what's your general opinion about how you coach and counsel patients?
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm going down a rabbit hole with this whole Robert F. Kennedy Jr. food pyramid
Go
upside
on,
down
that's
thing.
okay.
Yeah. So for those of you listening to this who think, well, he's the Secretary of Health and Human Services, he must know what he's talking about. My caution to you would be,
Compared to what the rest of the world says, there's
that
experts in
is
the same
probably a really good,
positions.
compared to what the rest of the world says. And also, it's probably pretty easy to find some good nutritional science and just see if in fact this that his department has come up with basically in a matter of weeks is in fact accurate. I mean, yeah, I would just take a look.
Okay,
So anyway, so
Chinese medicine, and then how
Yeah.
do you personally, as a practitioner, take a look at it and can
Right.
counsel patients?
Yeah. So I take this pretty seriously, and Chinese. So there's a saying in Chinese medicine, which is if you have an illness, first try and fix it with food, and if you can't fix it with food, then try herbs, and if you can't fix it with herbs, then try acupuncture. Well, here in the West, acupuncture is a lot sexier than herbal medicine, and so we tend to go to acupuncture first. herbs in Chinese medicine are not like drugs at all. They're really concentrated food. So, for example, if I make somebody an herbal formula, if we were in China, they would just take the herbal formula and go to the grocery store and buy everything at the grocery store, and then they'd go home and cook it up themselves, right? So it's just concentrated food. So it's just the same things that you can get from food, but just stronger. So
And those calories are inconsequential, I imagine.
in Chinese herbs,
Yeah.
oh my
Yeah,
God,
it means nothing. Okay.
yeah, it's like, how many calories is in your tea?
Right. Okay.
It's kind of nothing. Um, so 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 if we look at Chinese food therapy, uh, it's very much like the Chinese herbal therapy. So one of the so the way that they think about foods is, and we can put up the yin yang symbol, is some foods are yin and some foods are yang. So some foods are hot and fiery, and they strengthen the yang in the body. They have an affinity for the yang in the body. And then there are some foods that are more yin and that have an affinity for the yin in the body. And so, as everything in Chinese medicine, where it's all about harmonious balance. So we don't want to have too much yang and we don't want to have too much yin. And then plus a big thing in Chinese medicine is the season, right? So in
Right.
summer, which is a very yang summer, right? A yang environment, we can that changes what our dietary needs are, as opposed to the winter, which is a very yin time. So where I used to live, it was great because I lived in an area that had a huge farming community. And so it was super easy to eat according to the seasons. So, because you're not supposed to eat strawberries in December, right? Strawberries are very yin and juicy and cold. They're considered cold in Chinese medicine. So you should be eating them when they're ripe, which is in July, right? So in some parts of the country, it's a lot easier to eat seasonally because that's what's available from your local agriculture community. Here in the Mojave Desert, this is a food desert. So everything that we eat is imported from someplace else.
Going back to what you said about your natural diet, that's what it was for everybody. You ate
Yeah.
seasonally of what was available within this
Right.
50-mile radius.
Right. So, right, exactly. So it's very difficult. It's much more difficult to eat nutritionally here in the food desert. And then there's areas all over the country where there are food deserts. I mean, you can
Right, people are buying food at dollar
at
shops.
the dollar
right,
store.
right.
Yeah, because and it's not that they want to.
It's
They
their
don't have any
option, right.
other option.
Right.
Like one of the things that I thought, wow, wouldn't it be great if somebody took over, it seems like all over the country there are these empty strip malls, that or other types of malls that are just not, as popular as they were 20, 30 years ago. Why don't we take those things over and make farms out of them, and raise produce and raise things for local consumption? I always thought that would be kind of a great idea. But
So where do you when you get a patient that clearly needs a alteration in their mode of thinking, where do you begin? Whether it's somebody
It's
that's
pretty
obese or
hard.
with diabetes or with gout or with whatever
Well-
kind of food related thing that diet alteration might make a difference.
Well, you got to start with people where they're at,
Okay.
and
What does that mean?
so, well, like I have a patient, I haven't seen her in a while, but she basically, from what I could tell, purchased all of her food at like 7-Eleven.
Oof.
And it was pretty amazing. And like for her to go out to a really like healthy kind of meal would be something that I would consider a fast food restaurant or pretty close to a fast food restaurant, like like an Olive Garden or a what are
Fast casual, they call
yeah,
it.
fast casual, which is not a place to get really healthy food.
No, it's all fried and soaked with sodium.
And
so-
old.
and old,
I
right?
mean, it's old. It's been a long time on the shelf by the time you get to it. So for her, I mean, what am I? I'm not going to be talking to her about the chemical makeup of a complex carbohydrate or whatever. It's basically okay. How can you make a healthier choice given the routine that you already have? Like, let's start there. And even that was pretty hard because for her and for a lot of people, the drawing a connection between what they eat and how they feel or the state of their health is really hard and
Well,
really
you've
difficult
got
to
two
see.
classes of patients. You've got those who recognize, as well as you, the practitioner, that they need to make a change, and those who don't.
Yeah,
So,
and there's a lot of people who just don't, or or they they see it, but I think it's just so overwhelming or beyond them that they just kind of throw up their hands and just go, "Oh well."
or they do a fad diet for a month, or I do a fad
Right.
diet when I do my dry January, and that takes care of me for the year, and crap like that.
Right. Right. So I think it just can be very overwhelming. So for me, I always try and find, well, what is the simplest little thing that I can encourage somebody to do? Like the littlest thing. And sometimes it's eat breakfast,
Right.
right? Because it really is the most important meal of the day. I'm not kidding, it really is. Um,
My grandmother was right.
yes, she was. Yeah, or something like that. Or making a choice between like a higher fat um, uh, choice and a lower fat choice. Like, for example, maybe don't get the fried fish sandwich, maybe get the broiled fish sandwich, even though
Or
the whole
oatmeal
thing
over
is
bacon
probably
in the mornings. Yeah,
right.
right, right, right.
Or like who can give up bacon because it's so
That's
awesome.
so awesome.
But maybe, it's a special thing. It's not a daily thing. Just little things like that. Or water consumption. Are you drinking enough water? So it really involves starting very, very slowly. Um, and again, for me, I always bring in, well, where did your people come from? Like what is the natural diet for you?
But where do you start with? So it's easy when somebody wants to make a change. Where do you start with those patients where you need to initiate that change needs to be made here?
Well, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them change their
Yeah, I
diet.
guess so. I guess that's
So
what it
it's
comes
like
down
all
to.
I can do is say, why don't you try this? And if they go, no, I'm not doing it, then okay, don't do it. I mean, I'm not your mother, you know.
Right, because
So
you might have an obese patient, let's say, with one kind of problem after another that you were treating them for, that
yeah.
would be reduced by a change
Oh,
in diet and a loss of weight.
and not just that. I mean, I remember like my mother-in-law years ago. Um, Lost 30 pounds. And she said, I remember I saw her, I was like, whoa, you look fabulous. What happened? And she said, oh, I went on this diet. I lost 30 pounds. I feel terrific. She said, I don't have any knee pain anymore. And she said, I was going to have my knees replaced. And she said, no, they don't hurt at all.
Right, right.
And I mean, to me, that is huge. That is huge.
And that tells you all you need to know
Right.
right there.
And my personal opinion is her doctor should have said, "Why don't you lose 30 pounds and come
Before
back
we
before we do the knee replacement?" But again, that's asking too much of Western doctors. They do not learn anything about nutrition in medical school. It is not part of their education. They really don't know, and they just have a different model of how they think of things. And so if somebody comes and they X-ray their knees and they're like, "Whoa, your knees look pretty arthritic and pretty bad. Let's like replace them." That's what they're more tunnel vision. They more are, oh, you're here for knee pain. Well, let's look at the knee pain. They don't really pull back and look at the whole
Well, and
person.
this highlights also the disconnect between the point of having that food pyramid and then getting the information disseminated so that it can be put to use and something can be done about it. And if the healthcare professionals aren't doing it, then what's the point?
Well, exactly. And it's really tough because what it does is it makes everybody on their own, right? And again, because, and this again is my opinion, because we all come from a different place and we all have different ancestors. What works for you may not work for me.
Right. So that's a good point right there that you point out often. So and especially prevalent in this situation, I imagine, where Western medicine says, do this, go on this fad diet, do this, whatever. You're taking each person who comes in the door as who's in front of you,
Yes.
and you'll have 100 patients, and you'll have 100 different
Yes.
ways that you're going to resolve
Yes.
dietary issues.
Yes, I just had a patient today and I was putting in the needles and she said, "So, do you always put in the same needles on everybody?" And I said, "Absolutely not. I take your pulses, I look at your tongue, I decide what your differential diagnosis is today, and I design a point prescription based on what I found today." So, no, it's always different. Now, does everybody practice Chinese medicine that way? No, they don't. There are people out there that no matter who you are, you're going to go in and they're going to give you the same needles. And to me, they might be practicing acupuncture, but they're not practicing Chinese medicine. So I don't really know what they're doing. But okay, go ahead. No, so that's the beauty of Chinese medicine, is that everybody is different. Their ethnic origin is different. Their heritage is different. Their nutritional needs are different. Their lifestyle is different. Everything is different. And so we have to look at them as a unique organism and work within that uniqueness.
So that's why starting with your quote unquote people's diet is a logical place to begin.
Yeah, I think it's a great place to begin.
Okay, what else do we need to know about diet, how you look at it in Chinese medicine?
Let me talk about different types of food. So now a lot of this is, I think, kind of something that's kind of common sense. Like you can kind of figure it out. You don't have to like go to a class or read a book or anything like that. That foods are categorized into different tastes and different temperatures. Okay, so what does that mean? Okay, like tastes. Some foods are considered sweet. Some foods are considered bitter. Some foods are considered salty. Some foods are considered pungent. Okay, etc. Okay, each of those tastes corresponds to what we call the 5 elements in Chinese medicine. Okay, and the 5 elements, which is really old philosophy. It's way back. I mean, even, gosh, I don't even know. A long time.
Thousands of years.
Yeah. So there's 5 elements: fire, earth, metal, water, wood. And everything in the universe and everything within us is a combination, is one of those elements or a combination of those elements. And then each person tends to one of those elements or another. Like you might contain all 5 elements, but the primary element in you in particular, and I happen to know this, is fire.
Okay.
And like for me, the primary element that I tend to have is wood. Okay, so that's my and that's, you can kind of look at that. It has to do with body shape and that kind of thing. But also, so foods have different elements, and then those elements correspond to different organs in the body. And so
are you assessing that stuff on a patient without us knowing about it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
You can't tell people everything. So right, it's like too much. So yeah, so like for example, we want our foods to have a variety of those 5 elements in them: the sweet flavor, the pungent flavor, the salty flavor, the sour flavor, and the spicy flavor, right? So, or the bitter flavor. So we want all of those sort of in a mix. And so you can kind of tell, looking at foods, like what flavor they probably are. Some of it might sound a little weird. For example, like the strawberry I was talking about. Well, okay, clearly that's sweet. It's a strawberry, right? So that's going to be a sweet food, right? Now, the other thing that we look at is the food's temperature, and it's not the temperature like the cooking temperature. It's its innate quality. So, for example, a strawberry is considered cooling or cold, which you can kind of figure that out.
Sure.
Like if you take a bite of a strawberry, it's kind of cooling and refreshing, and that's why it's good to eat in July when they're ripe, right? Whereas something like I don't know, like
pepper.
or like a green pepper?
Yeah.
Okay, so like a green pepper. Okay, so a green pepper has more of like a bitter flavor, and so that's a little bit different than, and it's not as maybe a little bit cool, um, but it's not cold like a strawberry would be. Uh, let's say beef or lamb. Lamb is a good one. Lamb is well, certainly not cold, right? It's pretty warming, right? It's pretty warming, but it's also got kind of a sweet quality to it
Right.
too. If you compare it to like beef or pork, right? Although pork has a little bit of a sweet to it too. So you can kind of play around with it. Like lettuce, for example. Lettuce is considered bitter, right? Which we don't really think of lettuce as bitter, but then if you think about it compared to everything else, it's like, well, yeah, if I had to pick one, it's certainly not sweet, and it's not salty, and it's not sour, and it's not pungent. So what's left?
Bitter's left.
It's kind of bitter. And there are other leafy greens that are bitter, like dandelion greens are really bitter, or radicchio. If you've ever had radicchio, it's quite bitter. Arugula is kind of bitter, but it's also a little sour. So those food qualities also are foods that are healthiest to eat during the season that correspond to the elements. So in the summer, which is a young, hot climate, we kind of don't want to eat a lot of hot foods. We can tolerate a lot more cold and cooling foods because it's so hot outside.
Right.
Whereas in the winter, we might want to eat more warming, sweet, kind of nurturing sorts of foods in the winter because it's freezing cold outside. So trying to eat seasonally, even a little bit, is really helpful. And people even notice, they'll notice like, oh, it's November and I ate an orange and I got a stomachache. Well,
Interesting. Okay.
it's freezing cold in November and you ate a freezing cold orange and it hit your stomach and your stomach said, this is too cold for me, right? Whereas if you would have eaten something cooked like soup or something, your stomach would have been happy.
Or that same orange in July, your stomach would welcome it.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's kind of where I like to start. So that's and those flavors and those temperatures are exactly how we talk about herbs. There's hot herbs, there's cold herbs,
Oh,
there's
okay.
neutral herbs, there's sweet, sour, salty, bitter herbs.
So then you would be prescribing them accordingly
Yes.
based on the needs, those
Yes.
needs. Okay.
Yes. And there's a whole bunch of traditional Chinese medicine formulas that have been used for, literally hundreds, if not thousands of years, where they've already kind of worked that out. So it's not like you have to like invent the wheel, right? I mean, you can make specific formulas, and I like to make custom formulas for people, but I usually start out with a formula that has already been working since, AD 500 or whatever.
Right.
And then I like to add things to it and play
And
around
even
with
if you're eating the proper diet for yourself, your people, as you say, there still could be excesses or deficiencies that might need to be dealt with herbs and things like that, right?
Oh yeah. So, for example, like, things happen, and so people can, be doing their best with their diet. But like, I just had a patient who just got back from this like amazing vacation, and she and her husband were saying, oh, we had such a lovely time, but we drank fabulous wine and we ate lovely food every day, and so now they're feeling a little pudgy and they're feeling a little not as healthy as they were feeling before the trip, but they had a lovely time. So now they've kind of gotten back on the straight and narrow, and they're getting back to their routine, and they'll be feeling better soon. But I mean, if you're on a vacation on a boat somewhere, I mean, why not?
Midnight buffet on those cruises, boy.
Apparently, yeah. So I mean, you don't have to be a complete you don't have to be religious about it, but so that happens, and then let's say people are injured or they've suffered an illness or something, and that can really change what's going on with you physically. I mean, a lot of illnesses can really weaken people, and so you want to build that up. And you want to strengthen people that have become deficient because of an injury or an illness. So that's where herbs come in.
Well, fascinating stuff. Thank you so much. I guess another thing my grandmother was right about is you are what you eat. So,
Well, yeah. yeah. And we are in kind of a tough spot now. I mean, because, you know, we're not getting a lot of help from any real experts. And now, you know, I mean, the things that are on TikTok and the things that are on, Instagram, and I mean, there's so much bad information out
But
there.
anything you can do naturally, I guess, for lack of a better term, to replace things in your diet. For instance, make your salad dressing versus buying it, and and you'll
Actually,
reduce some of the bad things
my
that are in that jar,
yeah, I
and
mean, my personal opinion is the
you can make
fewer things
everything.
that you have in a box
Right, right,
or
right,
a
or
bottle, the
right,
better,
right.
or a can, the better.
Yep.
But, when I was little, I learned how to cook, right? So a lot of
Another
times
lost art.
people don't learn that. And so expecting people to figure out how to do that is asking a lot, And so what I would say is start small,
Well, my
start
my
small.
grandmother used to say, "Come here, maybe you'll learn something." I'd be like, "Oh, but I learned something, and I know how to cook."
Right,
So
right. So there's that. So, you know, yeah, so like just to start small,
okay.
um, try and figure out, like, instead of stopping at a fast food place and getting some breakfast sandwich, is there some way that maybe you could replace that with something easy that you could do yourself at home that would be better for you, you know?
You can put steel cut oats on the stovetop the night before, and there's almost no effort. So,
There you go. You could do that,
yep.
and those are really good for you. Yeah, so it is tough, and we're inundated with a lot of information, some good, some bad. It's very, very difficult to wade through. Um, yeah, very difficult.
As with everything, lots of information to wade through, as Susan said. But like with everything, as we talk about each week, be your own best advocate and be on the lookout for what's best for you and what works for you. So hopefully we gave you a little something to think about your diet and your dietary needs and the way you go about looking at food based on how Susan looks at it through the Chinese medicine lens. As always, this is Susan Wellman. She is an Oriental medicine doctor and East Asian medical practitioner here in the Las Vegas, Nevada Valley. Her information comes across the screen every so often. If you'd like to get in touch, hold on there, superstar. If you'd like to get in touch with her with questions, comments, anything, we will try and get back to you. You may also do so in the comments section below. The stars of the show are Leo, the black flat hair, Marty, the gray wire hair, Joel, the kitty cat, the Raggedy Ann doll kitty cat here, has been sitting here with his leg on my arm. I've just been waiting for him to, as he naps, dig those claws in, but so far I've been lucky. So this is the In Medicine and On Medicine podcast for this week. I'm Scott. Everybody have a great day. We will see you next time.
Bye.